And this podcast is brought to you by the Repost Network. Repost Network. Monetize your SoundCloud content. Sign up today at repostnetwork.com. This is the power of pro wrestling. A podcast by wrestling fans for wrestling fans. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Coming up today, there's a time to show off, and there's a time to be pretty. There's the number one contender series. There's the world title series. There's cable televised wrestling. And there's international wrestling on American television. Even Sinclair Broadcasting wants in on this. So sit over there, chill out, eat and drink your sodas, turn your volume up. Yeah, that's loud enough. The Power of Pro Wrestling Podcast. Next.
And welcome to this very special 50th episode of the Power of Pro Wrestling Podcast, the podcast by wrestling fans for wrestling fans. And for this special 50th episode, I'm going to be joined by my original co-host, Mr. Cornbread, Chris Heineken.
Oh my goodness. Where have you been the last 49 episodes?
I don't know. I guess I've just been discussing pro wrestling. How about yourself?
Well, I'm just putting deodorant in. I think I'm still tested positive for gravy right about now, but meanwhile, coming up today, as you already heard in the open, we discussed the world title series. We discussing international wrestling. We discussed televised wrestling. We have 2 new games coming up in today's episode to make it all special. But before we go any further, I think it's our duty and our job to show appreciation to you, the audience, for tuning in and listening every single time. When I say the last 49 episodes of the Power Pro Wrestling Podcast. It's through your support and through your interaction with us that, hey, this podcast is even possible. So guess what? I think it's our duty, but you know what? It's our desire and our honor to say thank you, the audience, for tuning in to us and making us a part of your family every single week.
Yeah, most definitely. But I think we're going to kick this off, Mr. Cornbread, Chris Heineken. We're doing the top 5 moments of the week. So I've allowed you, since this is the 50th episode, to pick your top 5 moments, and I'm going to discuss them with you and give kind of my thoughts and feedbacks on your top 5 moments. So I like to go from 5 to 1, so give me number 5 moment, and I'll kind of discuss it with you.
Let's go to number 5 moment in the World Title Series, the TNA World Title Series. And this one, even though I have a whole lot of great matches in this one, whether it's Tigre Uno versus DJZ in Group X division, and I really have that one is very, very good. But the thing that really got me was my number 5 moment. Even though I really want to include Tigre Uno and DJZ, James Storm and the Monster Abyss from Group TNA Originals. That's one of my number 5 picks. It is my number 5 pick. That rivalry has been good. But the fact that they had the audience glued to what Abyss does and to what James Storm does, and it was nonstop, and the audience was into the match. They were literally into it. That made my top 5 moment, and the match delivered. It had an 8 on my board, even though I had my X Division matches a 9. This one right here spoke volumes. Both of them did a lot more than what we thought.
Yeah, and what's interesting, we've actually had James Storm and Abyss for the last several months have been part of the group, The Revolution.
True.
And so to see them feud and stuff like this has been, I guess, quite interesting. To see Abyss, who's been there for a long time, and James Storm, who's been there as a long time, and then having the Revolution kind of split up and having the two go at it. It's just been an interesting dynamic, especially with the World Title Series is going on. It's been something different for Impact.
A little throwback to the days of 1989. No, NWA, circa NWA. A little throwback to the days, but go ahead and continue because I think it's good.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's something different, and I mean, the World Title Series it has its good points and its bad points.
True.
I feel it was kind of stupid to like go from Bound for Glory having Matt Hardy winning the title and then he has to forfeit the title because EC3 wants to whine and cry and stuff like that and do an injunction so Matt Hardy relinquishes the title and they do the World Title Series. It was kind of silly to me, especially with Ethan Carter having a title rematch that guaranteed to him anyway. I don't know why he was throwing just a hissy fit.
And not just that, but a tag title match with his partner Tyrus against the Wolves.
I know.
New Orleans.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. We might have to talk about that sometime as well.
Well,
but I mean, I guess that would be a very good match between the two. So,
number 4 in this little series, I will go Tigre Uno DJZ Group S division. The fact that both competitors and X division competitors, you're taught certain ways to work a 4-sided ring and to work a 6-sided ring. The fact that DJZ actually took a little page out of Money Brown's playbook, and instead of the pounce, he actually jumped up and hit a Hurricanrana from a different side. Both guys know how to use the 6-sided ring to their advantage, all 6 sides, and it could be just opposite ropes just to hit an offensive move. To me, that makes number 4 on my list.
Yeah, and I mean, I like the TNA X division, and it's a little bit weird that they're putting X division competitors in the World Title Series. There's a lot of the World Title Series to me that's a little preposterous. It's to me like they have the TNA Knockouts are in it, which I'm not knocking the women, but for them to be
group wild card
and
group wild card, excuse me.
Yeah, well, just the whole women thing and competing for the world title. To me, you already have your championship. There's no reason for you to compete for a male championship. I'm not saying that they're not great, not valuable, not great to watch, because I mean the TNA Knockouts are probably the best women in wrestling right now, other than maybe the NXT women's wrestlers. Or especially with the influx of all the Shimmer and everybody there. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting dynamic that you're taking the X Division stars and stuff like that. I know TNA was built on the X Division. That's one of their shining things. And
to put them on the map.
So, I mean, obviously, a DJZ and Tigre Uno. You got Tigre Uno is Mexican and from Mexico from
AAA promotion.
I was about to get to that. And then DJZ being a high-flying guy, just obviously a great match. TNA, that's one of their strong points, is the X Division. And so, I mean, obviously as a match, it's a good match, but it's just weird to me. It almost reminds me of WCW and having the Cruiserweight vision. And like Chris Jericho has talked about this, almost being a leopard being an X Division star or like a Cruiserweight star but in WCW. So, I mean, it's just interesting. To me, this World Title Series is taken away and it's putting too much focus on just the World Title. They don't put focus on the X Division title, the Knockouts title. There's other things that they could have put focus on. So, to me, it's a little cumbersome having the World Title Series. I get why it was done, but to me, it's taking away from other things that TNA could be doing.
And I think it always pushes the question of the what if and ... But with that being said, that leads to number 3. And this one was a toss-up. Either the Kingdom, Red Dragon, Michael Elgin match, the 6-man tag, or Dalton Castle, Cedric Alexander. Because I already know the pedigree of the Kingdom and Red Dragon and Elgin, they're not my number 3. My number 3, Dalton Castle, Cedric Alexander. Just to see how Dalton Castle would be without his boys and Cedric Alexander, how he will rebound after that no disqualification, no holds barred war he had with Moose at the All-Star Extravaganza pay-per-view.
Yeah,
that's my number 3.
Yeah, and I mean, it's an interesting dynamic. I've said probably ad nauseum how big I am on Dalton Castle, and just I love his gimmick and his character, and he just stands out to me in Ring of Honor where a lot of guys don't. He's got that charisma, that just presentation, everything about him, having the boys, just everything about him. He's what sticks out to me in Ring of Honor, and to me, he doesn't really fit there. He really fits more in a WWE style because they're more about character and stuff like that, and I feel that's where he stands out heads and tails above the rest of the Ring of Honor stars. But what's great, Ring of Honor and the fan base are really known to kind of reject that style or that character and charisma, but he can hold his own in Ring of Honor. So I'm very big on Dalton Castle, and it is interesting, like having that big loss to Silas Young, the last real man, and losing his boys. It is interesting to see how he would rebound in this match. against Cedric Alexander, who had that match with Moose.
I think what's winning Dalton Castle over, not just with what you said, his charisma, his showmanship in the ring.
Yeah, showmanship, another good word I should have used there.
But what's winning him over is his amateur wrestling background. That's what's winning him over big time. That's why you can get behind a Dalton Castle. I mean, that's not taking anything away from Cedric Alexander, who literally since he debuted in Ring of Honor in Louisville, Kentucky, I've been really, really high on him and his tag team partner. And his tag team partner, another inspiration to me, that being Caprice Coleman. But, however, with that said, Dalton Castle, to me, his amateur wrestling is winning him over. No question about it. Number 2 on this list, I got football versus basketball. I have 6'5" versus 6'7". I have Moose versus Donovan Dijak, football versus basketball in a wrestling ring. That's my number 2, simply for the fact that both of them are close to the 300-pound mark, and both of them are high-flying big men. Question is, are big men, is that the normal for big men to try to reemerge themselves here? Because you have a flying NFL player versus a big-time two-sport athlete, Donovan Dijak, who's most prominent in basketball. So that's an interesting concept to me. That match worked. Both men tore the house down in San Antonio. I gave that sucker a 9 in my book.
Moose. I
and he won too, by the way.
Yeah. It's just an interesting dynamic to have other sports athletes come in the ring and compete. Like you mentioned, the whole football versus basketball dynamic in a wrestling ring. That is quite interesting. And 2 big men. And like you mentioned, how they're both athletic and fly and stuff. I'm not necessarily against big guys that are able to do that. I can applaud them, like the whole Brock Lesnar WrestleMania 19 thing. But with that, you're taking away from your smaller guys. Like if you were in TNA and you were a big guy flying, you're taking away from your X Division star. So I mean, I'm glad that Moose can do it. I'm glad Donovan Dijak can do it. But you take away that dynamic from the smaller guys, because as Donovan Dijak and Moose, they're power guys. They have power. They have muscle. They can do those big power moves. You're not going to see some small guy like Dalton Castle give you a super power bomb or something like that just because he's not physically able to. So, I mean, they need to stick with what they know, and do power moves. I'm glad that they can be high-flying stars, but they need to stick with what they know, because that takes away your other talents.
I think more it's a little tribute to TNA, what TNA X Division used to be built on, where it wasn't about weight limits.
The no limits.
It was about no limits. Samoa Joe, when he was in TNA, added that extra dimension to that X Division, and so did Kurt Angle, believe it or not, when Kurt Angle won the X Division title. So it's good to have athletes like that, but you don't want to just say, hey, I mean, granted, you could do big power moves and you could do quick moves and stuff like that, but you don't want to limit yourself to just that, because if you limit yourself to just that, you're making it predictable for your opponents to go after you, because they know your power strengths. They know for a fact that they know that the knees are the delicate part of the body. They know that you grip with arms, that you grip with your hands. I mean, to me, that's number 2, and those are excellent points you just made, and I totally agree with you. Number 1, and we're going in your wheelhouse on this one. The main event of Monday Night Raw. The number 1 contenders match. Ziggler, Alberto Del Rio, the U.S. champ. Kevin Owens, Intercontinental champ. Roman Reigns. It was the main event that needed to deliver. This was to determine the number 1 contender to Seth Rollins' title. This match needed to deliver in the main event on a Cena-less Monday Night Raw. It needed to deliver. It did. It got a 10 on my board.
Yeah, I'm glad. Like you mentioned, with John Cena being out for right now, they needed something big to deliver. And, I mean, this was quite interesting because you didn't have Seth Rollins in the main event. You didn't have your normal main event. And with Raw's ratings being down, I think we've discussed ad nauseum for the last several weeks, they need to do something to get it back on course. So to give us a main event that was different to crown a number 1 contender, I don't think they've really done that in a while, and it's interesting. And just their pick of Roman Reigns, Dolph Ziggler, Alberto Del Rio and Kevin Owens. It was great, and the match was really good. A lot of my friends and stuff have talked about how great the match was. So, I
let's not forget the fact that those 4 individuals competed in previous matches just to set up for this main event. We can't leave that out.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it was good to let them do qualifying matches to get into the main event and then have a fatal 4-way. It was very good, and the match delivered. It was a good quality match, like you said. And now Roman Reigns winning, no shock there. I'm just surprised they are decided to pull the trigger on Roman Reigns and have him face Seth Rollins at Survivor Series. I'm just wondering where Dean Ambrose is going to play, because it's been strongly rumored that we're going to get a Shield triple threat match at WrestleMania. And with Roman Reigns as champ, I don't know if that would be effective or not.
But I'm not leaving out the ultimate X factor in that briefcase. And speaking of that, I mean, what do you think of the top 5? Granted, those was my top 5 moments. What do you think about it?
I mean, I feel you gave us a great top 5. I was surprised that you put WWE at the top of the list, but
it needed, but it was the chance. It was the chance that they needed to deliver, because the other 2 companies can deliver even in the top 5, but WWE really needed to deliver. And as we continue with the power of pro wrestling, we gotta take this break. But still to come, we'll discuss cable televised wrestling, WWE's HD shrinkage, international flavor on U.S. television, and WWE versus NFL going head-to-head. We're going outside the ropes next. Don't go anywhere.
This is Brad Hargett, and you're listening to the Power of Pro Wrestling podcast.
And welcome back to this special 50th edition of the Power of Pro Wrestling podcast.
Number 50! I'm Chris Heineken.
Yeah, like I said, I'm Robert Red. I'm still joined by my guest, Chris Heineken. So it's time to get to discussing these questions.
Yes, and we encourage you, and wherever you're listening, to get involved on social media. You know where I am, Chris Heineken 1 on Twitter.
At Robert Red Jr. on Twitter for me as well. So you can check us out there. You can submit your suggestions and feedback to our discussion questions or anything we have about the show. I'll just mention that now so I don't have to bore you to death repeating it 20 times. So, but let's get to our business at hand.
Go for it.
We got 4 discussion questions. We're going to knock these out. So I'm going to start with this one, Mr. Heineken. So the way it's been phrased, it says, will wrestling continue its success on cable TV in the future like it has in past decades? So what's your thoughts on that, Mr. Heineken? I'm going to send it to you first.
A good question. And I would say yes, because because you have positive and negatives in the world of cableized television. The positive being that just in case if, one network drops, you can always go to the next one, because there are going to be other networks that's willing to pick up your product. The negative is you can have too many networks and you don't have your core audience set. And to me, in the 80s, you had your audience set. In the 90s, you pretty much had your audience set, no question about it. But now, with the emergence of more and more wrestling companies going for any television means, I would say yes, it will be successful. And I think it will be successful even just for one network where you have a core audience. But the thing about having a core audience is you need to up your ratings and you need to up your deals. And I looked at TNA's, and to be honest, TNA's ratings and All Righteous ratings on Destination America were not far behind from ESPN SportsCenter ratings. They're pretty much dead on. So my answer is yes.
I'm kind of divided on this question just for the simple fact of the way television is being viewed has changed over time.
Exactly. Amen.
Back in the 80s or 90s, the prevalence of what I'm about to say was not really there. In the 80s, it wasn't there. The 90s, it started coming a little bit. And just here over the last few years, it started coming into play. And that's that dreaded I word, which a lot of people hate.
No, you're right.
The internet.
You're right.
It's played a bigger part. I mean, as time has went on and as technology has improved and stuff like that, we've got more cable networks, so there's more things for people to watch. So that's going to fragment the
No, you're
audience.
right.
Yeah, it's fragmented the audience, so they have more and more stuff to view. Now, I'll give you an example of shows that are still thriving and booming on the cable television. And I'm a big Walking Dead fan. I know this is a wrestling talk, but I'm going to get on Walking Dead, and I'm going to bring
It's a television question.
I'm going to bring it back to wrestling though. Is there's millions and millions of people watching Walking Dead, and it's on AMC, not a premium channel, but it is cable television. So I still feel that wrestling can be successful on cable television, but with the internet becoming more and more prevalent, people are watching more and more television on the internet now. With the emergence of, back in 2005, YouTube. You have Netflix coming on, and
you got Hulu Plus.
Hulu, all these streaming services, and then the WWE Network just being released like a year or so ago. Oh, that's coming into place. I mean, and just the way consumers are viewing television, and television is being consumed, I don't know how well wrestling would do on cable anymore, just for the simple fact that television viewing habits have changed.
And sometimes, and a lot of times, that's why you have to play the role of Ring of Honor. They're on cable, and they are on local syndicate television. That's the advantage, because when one idea goes down, another idea presents itself. So we got question 2. What do you think it is?
Yeah, we're going to go with the HD entrance. So, does WWE need to decrease the HD entrance stage in order to add more fans to their weekly television shows and or monthly pay-per-view? So, what's your thoughts, Mr. Cornbread, on this one?
Pay-per-view numbers have averaged between 11,000, and we're talking the year 2015, and you could go to the stats and look it up and see for yourself. 2015 stats for WWE as far as pay-per-views go averaged from 11,000 to 17,000. Only the network special, live from MSG, was over 19,000. And I paid attention to a lot of details and when it comes to stuff like this. And granted, I will agree with you. You want to make your product look big and better, but you don't want to take away seats. And since the expansion of the HD set, or the expansion of the Titantron for, you WWE old heads, it has decreased the seating capacity for Monday Night Raws and for SmackDown. The seating capacity has decreased to the point where the majority of this year, from Raw and SmackDown combined, you've only averaged less than 9,000 per television. The lowest you've gotten was 4,100, and that was a Monday Night Raw. So I would say, don't decrease it, but don't take seats away.
Yeah, I mean, obviously seating capacity is an important thing when it comes to producing television and pay-per-views. And now that I've actually stopped and think about it and tried to evaluate my thoughts and opinions on it, it's taking away seats. It depends on what you're gunning for. On a Monday Night Raw, if it's smaller than a pay-per-view, I'm okay, because a pay-per-view is supposed to be more special because it doesn't happen as often as Monday Night Raw. So your Raw capacity, you want about that 10,000 people, I would say. Your Raw shows, you don't need to have as many people as you're going to have a pay-per-view. Like, we're here in Arkansas, we have a building here that seats 10,000 people. So with the set and stuff, that's going to take away a few thousand seats. So that's going to probably take it down to 8,000 if we're filled to capacity. So with that, I'm okay if we have a Raw here. I don't think we necessarily need to have a pay-per-view here, because pay-per-views you need to have, like Chicago, stuff like that, buildings that can hold like maybe 20, 30,000, because the pay-per-view needs to feel more special. So,
they haven't been in the 30,000s in the last 2 years, just for Monday Night Raw.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and for Raw, I'm okay. Like, if you have about 10,000 people for Raw, I'm okay. A pay-per-view needs to...
It needs to be more.
It needs to be more. It needs to have a bigger seating, more capacity and stuff like that. In terms of the stage in the area, for that, I want them to change the HD set, just for a simple fact. I like it back in the day. Like, if you remember 2002, here's a good example. Like Judgment Day, they had like the tombstones, the headstones was a set like that. I would like the theme of the pay-per-view really to be revolved around the set, and use the set like they did for TLC, like having the chairs hanging and stuff like that. because if not, it's just the same old bland, boring HD set, and the pay-per-views don't set themselves apart. So I definitely agree that the HD set does need to be changed when it comes to pay-per-view versus Raw and SmackDown and stuff like that, because as to me, I just, and that's a personal preference of mine. Like I mentioned, Judgment Day. Like you remember the old when they had Backlash right after WrestleMania, the whole swinging hooks thing. I love that. I think that makes the set look cool, and it really helps to differentiate the pay-per-view from Monday Night Raw.
Exactly.
The pay-per-view doesn't feel like it's just a bigger Monday Night Raw. It makes it feel different and special and unique, which is what it's supposed to do anyway, because it happens less often. Because if something, just like in life, if something happens less often, it's more special. It has more meaning and significance, and that's what the pay-per-views need to have over Monday Night Raw.
And that's the best part about the Power of Pro Wrestling podcast. You get knowledge and you learn. Next question.
Yeah, next question. Hey, nice segue there. Now we're going to actually kind of keep it with TV, but we're going to go a little bit different on TV. We're going to talk about the impact of international wrestling companies airing on American TV. This is something I think I actually came up with.
Which is an excellent question.
Yeah, because, I mean, as you've seen here recently in the last year, like I think this past October 2014, Lucha Underground, which are affiliated with AAA, started airing on Access TV. If you get that, we've got New Japan Pro Wrestling, and Global Force Wrestling has started doing some New Japan stuff. So we're getting a lot of international flavor is coming into American television. And so I wanted to kind of get your thoughts and your feedback on that, Mr. Cornbread, about how that's impacted professional wrestling.
Ooh, I know Mike Tenay would probably harbor my head for this. I'll even go further than that. I would go to the event that literally launched Lucha Underground. And this was groundbreaking. And that was when AAA, Triple Mania, premiered on American television pay-per-view. That was what set up Lucha Underground to be aired even on a new network like the El Rey Network. Or I could really go further back and go to 1994. A AAA pay-per-view in the United States on U.S. television pay-per-view. When Worlds Collide. That's how we really got to know Rey Mysterio Jr., Psychosis, Juventud Guerrera. Some of these big names that you heard, even Louis Spicolli for UECWO hits and WCWO hits. It's had a tremendous impact because you're not limiting yourself to just US-based companies like WWE, like TNA, and yes, like Ring of Honor. You're opening up the door to multiple cultures coming in. And multiple cultures on television is a very good thing because think about this. You're helping the U.S.-based companies recruit and vice versa.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, and if you just look at it, they are having a significant impact because I think it is having a little change to the style of professional wrestling with how it's being presented now. So, I think it is having significant impact with the Lucha Underground. And I mean, it's been good for the fan, the consumer, because we're getting to see a lot of different styles here in the U.S. that we may have never seen before. Just a whole New Japan Pro Wrestling and getting to see what they're about.
And you're not just watching Ring of Honor television just to find out about New Japan.
Yeah, you're getting New Japan, you get to see it for yourself, and then getting Mexico style with AAA coming in with Lucha Underground and seeing that, and it being presented different. It's giving you more wrestling, and this has been the best time to be a pro wrestling fan, is having all this great content. WWE, NXT, TNA, Ring of Honor, New Japan, Lucha Underground, just so much wrestling for wrestling fans like we are. It's had a good
variety.
Yeah.
That's what 2015 and 2014 has been, a variety year.
Yeah, it has been a variety year. So I mean, I think it's had a good impact on professional wrestling just to see that. And I mean, having Lucha Underground is supposed to be coming back early 2016.
Oh, yeah.
And New Japan's still airing on Access TV.
Yeah, that's going to be good.
Ring of Honor and TNA look like they're going to stay on Destination America, quite possibly.
I think it will happen.
And then you got NXT is still staying on the network and possibly maybe moving to TV sometime soon.
I think it will move.
And then having WWE Raw and SmackDown, it's a good time in sports to be a pro wrestling fan. So it's definitely had a great impact on professional wrestling. I think it's been good.
And both of us have discussed this off the air. You need variety to make wrestling work. And that's what this has done. I think we have another question, don't we?
Yeah, this is actually going to be our last question, and then I'll let you throw us to commercial break. Since we're talking about football players and pro wrestling, how about pro wrestling versus football? And we're going to talk WWE versus NFL. Now, as we know, Monday Night Raw airs head-to-head when football is on Monday nights, and you have Monday Night Football versus Monday Night Raw. And also on Thursdays, you have SmackDown airing against NFL games as well. So the question you have is WWE versus NFL head-to-head on Monday and Thursday nights. Is this best for business? Why or why not? So kind of give me your thoughts, Cornbread Chris Heineken, on this subject.
Competition in the marketplace is good for the consumer. I've learned that trick even watching Bloomberg television. And we're not talking, same genre as WWE versus WCW, which made it good for wrestling fans. We're talking sports fans in general. Like now, look at what you have. You have WWE on Monday nights. You've got the World Series on a Monday night. You have Monday Night Football on a Monday night and basketball on a Monday night. You have 4 big companies all head-to-head, same time, same place. But to stick with the question, I think it is good because you're forcing each and every company to top themselves. You're forcing them to keep your eyes glued on the television set and to keep your eyes glued on the channel, which is every general managers and owners of cable television want. I think it's good, especially for Thursday nights. Now, I will say, if football was only on the NFL Network only and not CBS, WWE would blow them out of the water. But because CBS is now inside of Thursday Night Football and ESPN is inside on Monday nights, head-to-head competition is best because you bring out the best in both companies. Sting said it best. WWE brought out the best in WCW during their highest point, and WCW brought out the best in WWE in their highest point. That's my opinion.
Well, I'm just going to echo your opinion on this one because, like you just said, competition is good for the marketplace.
Yes, it is.
Hey, everywhere you have a Walmart, it's good to have a Kmart. Everywhere you have a McDonald's, it's good to have a Burger King. Everywhere you have, I'm trying to think of another analogy I can use. Everywhere you have competition.
Where you have a Hobby Lobby, you have a Hancock Fabrics.
Yeah, if I can say that. It's good for competition. And for the marketplace, it's good for the consumer. And I feel it really forces each of them to present or put their best foot forward and put their best effort forward. Or because they don't want to be beaten by the other guy. So WWE, I feel when they have Monday Night Football on and it's supposed to be a big game, it's going to force them to put their best hand forward if they really care about football as a competition, getting their viewership. Because like you said, we're not in an era where it's WCW trying to beat you and put you out of business. It's anything on TV is really more their competition. They look at it now. They've broadened their scope of what their competition is since they don't really have that true competition within the genre of sports entertainment, wrestling. And it forces them to, I feel, put their best foot forward. Now, I know sometimes they don't do that all the time and how they present it, but I feel it's good for business to have NFL and WWE compete Monday and Thursday night. I would really like to see a wrestling war again, not necessarily put each other out of business, but I feel competition always brings the best out of a company. So it is good for business to have NFL and Monday Night Raw go head-to-head on Monday nights and Thursday nights.
And not just that, but the content of your competition will make it better. When we return, how did you get into the business? How did I get into the business? Our unique take on the wrestling business. Will we stay in? Will we keep in? Will we go out? 10 good minutes. It's coming up next. Don't go anywhere.
Hi, this is Joe Goodenhoof, and you listen to the Power Pro Wrestling broadcast.
And we're back with the special 50th edition of the Power Pro Wrestling podcast. I'm still joined by Mr. Cornbread Chris Heineken.
Hello.
And so for this segment, I figured we would do something different. This is the 50th episode. We really get to talk to one another because we normally discuss WWE, TNA, Ring of Honor, but we never discuss really our personal stories and history dealing with WWE and like how we got into the business, stuff like that, kind of our earliest memories of wrestling. So we're going to go back and forth and give like our story and take on professional wrestling. So I'll start with you, Mr. Cornbread Chris Heineken, and I'll answer this question as well. So what is your earliest memories of wrestling? Have you been like a long time wrestling fan? Have you just recently got into it? Kind of tell me your story. Kind of from where you start.
Well, a lot of people really don't know this story, with the exception of myself and the good Lord. First match I ever saw was the year 1988. I was 3 years old. Year 1988. Jerry Lawler beating Kirk Hennig for the then AWA World Championship. And it was the first time, it was history making because it was the first time that a World Championship changed in Memphis, which is occasionally where I'm from. And when I saw that, and I ended up seeing it on television, it got me hooked. And I had some good school friends of mine, and they all wanted to, do like a little reporting on wrestling and elementary and all that. So the year 1990 is when I actually got in. And yeah, at the strange age of 5, because you hear most drummers get in at the age of 3. But I got in 1990, April to be exact, 1990. And we had so much variety of wrestling, whether it's NWA Pro, which ended up becoming WCW Pro, went back to it, to Worldwide, to Superstars, WWE Superstars, you WWE old heads, Superstars, to Main Event and all that. And our assignments was we will watch and they will give us 2 or 3 or 4 action figures and a little mini ring. And they would say, hey, watch this match from start to finish, bell to bell, and duplicate that match with the action figures inside the little made-up ring. And we would do that. And we would call play-by-play and all that, and they would grade us on it. And the highest grade I've ever got for a match was a 96 out of 100. And that was insane. The lowest I've gotten was a 75. And that was the craziest thing I've ever gotten. But I was able at a young age to go into sports locker rooms and to just be at ringside at certain wrestling events. Just there in the city of Memphis, because we didn't have a whole lot of stuff rolling with us. But just being there opened my eyes. And I remember a veteran wrestler from Missouri, Jeff Gaylord. Most people know him as the Missouri Tiger. I remember Jeff Gaylord when during the era of Memphis wrestling getting on cable television in the 90s with the whole USWA deal. You had USWA Texas and USWA Memphis together, and that was when Memphis wrestling was on cable television every day of the week, Monday through Friday, for 1 hour, Monday through Friday, because that's how I was introduced to Brandon Baxter from that deal. And I remember him saying these words: if you're not in the business to learn every day, then the business is not ready for you. And those are words that really stuck to me. And he actually said this. at a press conference section. And Jeff Gaylord, who most people will classify as Mike Awesome before Mike Awesome became big, Gaylord really appealed to me. And so did Jerry Lawler. But the thing that really got me was wrestlers go outside the ropes like we would do. But this time, they would play softball games and charity games, and you would have faces versus heels. And even from that all the way up until now, kind of carried on. And I remember here in Arkansas, my co-host here, Robert Red, and I'm pretty thankful that he did what he did for the sake of a friend. He knew some wrestling friends here in Arkansas, and said, hey, they have a little wrestling show, a little outside show in Hoxie. Would you like to come with me to it? I was like, yeah, sure. And went there. My current boss, Mike Day, who thought I was nuts to begin with, he heard a little bit of what I was kind of saying in the background when you didn't have live microphones, and it was raining outside.
Yes, it was, unfortunately. I
was
remember that
raining.
day.
It was raining outside, and the locker rooms were inside of a tire shop. And the thing about it is, Robert had introduced me to a lot of the other people, and one of the guys, I had a custom-made jacket, during the days of, I was a big fan of AJ Styles, and I had a custom jacket, almost a little bit, AJ Styles-like, and one of the wrestlers liked it and said, hey, what would you sell this for if you come back? I was like, $5-ish or whatever, and the guy ended up buying the jacket. But the thing that appealed to me was, other than that trip, which I thank you for, Robert.
Okay.
Was the fact that they decided that they were going to build a building and finally do a multi-purpose building and go into business. And that business is still in existence today, known as OCW, Out of Control Wrestling. And I wasn't the most welcome individual in the party, but because of hard work, because even the bosses will say, hey, I was a complete pain in the butt. But because of the desire to willing to work hard and to get better at your craft and to open up eyes and not just willing just to do something that is normal to everybody, but to go beyond what you're doing just to make sure that that every single show succeeded. Opened my eyes to say, I want to learn. And a couple of weeks ago, a couple months ago, I went to a Sunday morning church service. And the pastor was talking about peace. It was part of his sermon series. And this was a couple months ago, this year. And he broke down wrestling from a biblical perspective that I've never heard of. And it ended up making a whole lot of sense. And since then, I have always desired that whoever's working with me, or even if I'm working by myself, I will never present the same show twice. And by having that concept, it has helped me tremendously. And not only do I learn more about the business, I learn more about life when I learn more about this business. Work or non-work, whatever you want to call it. I gain more, I learn more in life, even in my personal life, when I learn more about the wrestling business and the hidden truths behind it. And that's just me, but enough about me, because this is a two-part conversation which all of you are listening to let me hear, or why don't we all hear how Mr. Rubber Red got into this business? Who said we have to have a time on it? Tell us your story.
Okay, I guess I will bore you to death. Really, my earliest memory, I'm sure I've watched wrestling all my life, but really, my earliest memory I have of pro wrestling, and Sean Waltman, if he ever listens to it, which I doubt he will, but hey, if he does, I'm going to plug you, X-Pac. I remember when he was just, I guess, the kid, and that infamous match he had on Monday Night Raw, beating Scott Hall, which he was known as Razor Ramon, and getting the 1-2-3, and then later becoming the 1-2-3 Kid. It, I think, is really my earliest memory of pro wrestling. So I guess there's just something about that that made it stick in my head and I can remember to this day that it's been over 20 years ago, and I can still remember that moment like it was yesterday because it was just something that stood out. Because you didn't see in wrestling back then the kind of unknown guy come in and beat the well-established star. So I guess it's what made it stand out for me. So I've pretty much watched wrestling my entire life, but that's really my earliest memory. Hey, now, I would really only watch WWE or WCW back in the day when Nitro came on. I didn't really go to indie shows or stuff like that. I wasn't really familiar with WWE. I was familiar with WWE and WCW, but I wasn't really familiar with the Memphis Wrestling or any other territorial wrestling because I guess just back then I had the grandeur. I wanted wrestling.
You had limited exposure.
Yeah, I had limited exposure, but I wanted the grandeur and all that, the production value and stuff like that. So I really didn't seek out any other professional wrestling, and I'll get into how I got into the indie scene later. But pretty much I've watched wrestling my entire life and watching Raw, and then obviously getting to live through the Monday Night Wars and WCW, going with WWE, and I still remember the night Hulk Hogan walked down in the infamous line of he's the third man, Hogan in the ring, dropping the leg drop.
Shock factor.
Yeah, I still remember that. So that's one of my favorite moments in professional wrestling. And so watching wrestling, going through that WCW and the Monday Night War and then WCW, I remember their Nitro for Panama City Beach and that going off the air and kind of remembering melancholy. It's actually in the house that I currently live in, which is where we record. Just a fun factoid. I watching that episode and then just watch Wrestling Evolve and stuff like that. Now, in about 2005, I kind of would wrestle backyard style, which I don't necessarily recommend. My story's a little different from a lot of other people, but I would like backyard wrestle. And when I say backyard wrestle, I didn't backyard wrestle like you would see on TV with like the barbed wire, light bulb, stuff like that. So I would kind of wrestle around with my cousins and stuff like that.
It was much more of a grappling style thing, was it?
Yeah, more grappling. And like I did what was called obviously the NWO was big, so I did the New Wrestling Organization and then kind of had a dispute about that. So I came up with my cousin the name WHW, World Home Wrestling, because it was kind of wrestling at home was kind of the whole deal. So that's where we came up with the name WHW and the WHW title. And I'd wrestle with my cousins, and then I did that. And then in 2005, I met my friend Shannon Dell, which I was introduced to me through my cousin Larry, which I feuded with a lot, Razor Blade. And from there I met them, and that's where I kind of grew the whole wrestling deal and did more shows and actually started wrestling. We would record our matches, and like a few years later, I'd put them on DVD and stuff. So for us to watch back and stuff like that, just to have something to do. I purposely took a class in college my senior year so I could learn how to video and edit and stuff like that, so I could do stuff like that. And it's during this time.
You do an excellent job even behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I will admit that.
Yeah, and that's where I learned how to do like my video editing and stuff like that. It's just that I've really learned sound editing here recently to do the podcast, which I will get to here in a minute. But it's during my time in college that I met my co-host, Mr. Cornbread Chris Heineken, and I don't even remember, or I know we met at a Taboo Tuesday.
It was the very first Taboo Tuesday pay-per-view.
Yeah, it being
Wings
on a
to Go.
Tuesday. I actually, Wings to Go is a local wings place that we have here in Arkansas. It's not a chain, not like Buffalo Wild Wings or anything like that, but we would go and watch it there. I actually would go with my dad because he's really who's responsible for getting me into wrestling. My mom still hates that fact that dad got me into wrestling, but we would go to Wings to Go at my cousin that I was telling you about, my cousin Larry, told me that WWE pay-per-views were being shown at this Wings to Go place, and I pretty well would go up until almost the launch of the WWE Network. They quit doing it, I think, like several months. But well, no, they actually aired.
It was a year, wasn't it?
Well, they
Close to a year.
well actually they aired the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view that aired right before the launch of the network, so they were still showing pay-per-views. They actually switched venues, like right before that happening. So, the last one that they aired that I was aware of was the Elimination Chamber right before WrestleMania 30. So I was pretty much going to that. And like I said, I met you back in 2005. Ivan, you kind of would help me with the whole backyard wrestling shows, doing voiceovers and stuff like that. And from there, the jump ahead, 2009, and my friend Shane that I'd met through my cousin Larry had told me about this wrestling promotion in Hoxie and stuff like that. And he said, I've got this friend. He told Mike that you mentioned the boss. I've got this friend that's a loudmouth that would be perfect in bringing me in. So he told me about the show, and that's where you mentioned I invited you to tag along with. And I actually started when I broke in.
Which ended up being a blessing to me.
Yeah. I actually was brought in as a referee. Dear God, did I suck as a referee, and I would be the first one to admit that. So,
But even through those experiences, you learned.
yeah.
Right.
Well, it was good to learn as a referee and stuff, and I mean, just learning on as time went. It's good and a blessing in having guys come in, but I'll continue with the story. I went from being a referee to being a manager or a second, because Shane's relative, David, which went by Dracon, he asked me to manage him because they had a show coming up, I think, the next week or a little bit after. We're in Black Rock, so he brought me in as a manager. And I did apparently such a good job that he wanted to bring me back in on a regular basis and be his manager, and that's where I spent a lot of my tenure. Well, being in the backyard and wrestling and stuff like that, I always wanted to be a wrestler. It was never my goal or intention to do anything else. I always wanted to wrestle. I guess I just like the pageantry of wrestling and stuff like that. I don't know if I really like the physicality or stuff like that, but I wanted to start wrestling, so I built my own ring with the help of my uncle and stuff like that. So shout out on the podcast to my uncle. And I started kind of doing self-training and kind of learning stuff like that and getting the ring and just learning how to wrestle. And I had my first match, which I was okay. I wasn't great. The match wasn't good. So after that, I kind of took some time off from wrestling, and then I think I came back, and I don't remember if I was managing or wrestling again. I think I went back to managing for a little bit, and then I got back into where I could actually wrestle on a full-time basis. So I got into wrestling. And then at the end of, I think, about the end of 2011, and I started having health issues. My legs were going numb during a match, and I was kind of, don't like that. So in 2012, I had what I would say is my last match, and I've not really wrestled since then. I'd love to get back into it. I may or may not do that. I haven't decided yet because I have other health issues, but I won't bore you guys to death. But in that time, I going back to the whole podcast and how this started, I've kind of told the story. I bought a microphone to do voiceovers because you couldn't always be with me to do commentary for the videos and stuff. So I got a microphone, which it's the same thing that we're using to record this podcast, to have you do voiceovers for me. And I just decided one day to do a podcast because I was kind of familiar with podcasting and stuff like that. Way back in 2007, I never really fully understood it and how I could fully utilize it until like 2012. So that's kind of the start of the podcast. And that's really kind of my story of breaking into the business, was just my friend Shane telling me about Hoxie, where you're still at and getting involved like that. So that's kind of really my story of how I got into the business and stuff.
Well, I want to ask you this question, and I'm pretty sure for people listening, if you have one advice, and I'll give my advice right before we go to take our next commercial break. I've listened to a whole lot of detail in your story. What would be the one advice that you would give somebody? And you could just go straight from your heart, real talk here. What would be the one advice or one piece of advice that you would give somebody who is either entering this business, and I'll answer the question myself too, that is entering this business or wants to be successful in life, period. if you have one piece of advice, or just 2 sentences or 3 sentences or however, what would you say to that individual or individuals, guy or girl, that wants to be involved in this business that will help them in life?
Okay.
What would you say?
Well, in terms of if you're wanting to get into wrestling, find you a good, reputable school. I'm going to plug Brian Zane. He's actually just talked about this topic. Find you a good professional wrestling school to where you can be trained right and properly. And when you are in wrestling school, shut up and listen. You have 2 ears, 1 mouth. You need to be listening more than you're talking. You need to shut up and listen and take experience from the guys that have been there before that they are trying to teach you. They do things for a purpose and a reason. So just shut up and listen to them. Don't open your mouth and insert your foot. Listen to them. They have experience. They know what they're talking about if they're a good, reputable trainer. So with that, and listen to the guys that are veterans in the business once you get trained, and listen to them and grow your knowledge and stuff like that. Now, in order to be successful in life, I hate to be corny here, but I'm going to quote them: never give up. Have that stick-to-itiveness, be determined, and to do what you're going to do, and don't say quit. Do not quit. Do not give up. Just keep sticking to what you're doing, and don't let anything stand in your way of being successful, and you'll be successful. Also, I mean, that would be my advice I would give to anyone who wants to get into this business, and also if they want to be successful in life, just never give up, never quit, just stick to it, and you will be successful. Hard work will pay off.
I could not agree more. Even in my advice, I could not agree more. And I'll echo everything that you just said. And I'll up the stakes with this. Be committed. And this is something I've learned yesterday. And it's something that really, really stuck. Be committed to your direction going forward. Don't look back. You have a straight, narrow path right in front of you. Why look to the left? Why look to the right? Why even look back? You don't have eyes in the back of your head realistically. Your arms are not made to go backwards. You're made to go forward. Never give up. Heck yeah. I'll amen that to 14,000. But be committed. Be committed to your goal. And true defeat is the day and the moment that you stop trying. Don't be defeated. Get distracted by good stuff. Don't be distracted by bad stuff. And always attempt to defy the odds. Speaking of that, when we return to the Power of Pro Wrestling Podcast, what are the odds that Dolph's world champion by this time next year? The odds of Dudley's winning the tag titles in Ring of Honor and the X Division star becoming world champ? Well, guess what? We got more of that because we defy the odds. The numbers game next.
This is the Godfather, and you're listening to the Power of Pro Wrestling. Oh yeah, podcast.
And we're back. We have a new little segment. Normally you would hear bold predictions or whatever, but we have a new game that you and I are going to play, and you can play along at home. It's called Defy the Odds. We call this the numbers game. We have 8 topics. 8 topics very shortly, and what we're going to do is, for each and every topic, we're going to give our numbers percentage that this is going to happen. Let's get to it. Case number 1. Dun, dun, dun. Chances that Dolph Ziggler is world champion by Survivor Series 2016.
I'm going to say a 10% chance on this one. Dolph Ziggler has really been, for the last several years, kind of in the mid-card, upper mid-card, and he just got out of a terrible feud with Rusev. I don't think WWE wants to push him really to the main event scene ain't ever again and be world champion, especially with Roman Reigns. You got Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins. A lot of guys I feel are ahead of him in terms of the world title shot. So I just give him a very slight, maybe 10% chance of him being world champion by Survivor Series 2016.
I would agree in certain respects, because it's not just Ziggler falling off the ladder. I think a lot of factors have affected that, and TMZ. I mean, technically, the storyline with Rusev was completely horrible, and the crazy thing is, it took a crazy source like TMZ to even, end the whole storyline deal. So I would give it a low number 2. I would give it 9% chance that he's world champion by 2016 Survivor Series. Cling! Here we go. Case number 2. Dun, dun, dun. Chances that John Cena will tie Ric Flair in both U.S. and world title reigns.
As much as I hate to say this, I do see this as a highly probability, so I could definitely say maybe a 60-65% chance that he will tie Ric Flair in both U.S. and world title reigns. I feel WWE is going to break the record, allow him to break the record, or at least tie the record with Ric Flair in terms of the U.S. and the world title, so I could see this as happening, maybe 65% chance.
Just to get people up to speed on the whole John Cena Ric Flair deal, Flair is considered the Boston Celtic, even though he classifies himself as the LA Laker, whereas John Cena is considered the LA Laker, almost classified as the Boston Celtic. Ric Flair has 16 world championships. John Cena has 15. Even though technically John Cena has already surpassed Ric Flair by far as one of the greatest WWE champions of all time. And here's the thing. John Cena can never catch Ric Flair for this reason. John Cena has defended his championship against WWE-style opponents. He kept the title in WWE. Where Ric Flair, on the other hand, has literally defended his championship against outsiders outside of the normal company, the normal organization. Ric Flair has 6 U.S. titles. John Cena has 5. I say it's a high probability number. I'm going as high as 78%. It will happen. Cling! Case number 3. Step it! The chances that the Dudley Boys, a.k.a. Team 3D, win the tag titles in Ring of Honor.
Well, it's going to depend on how soon you're talking about, because I don't see it as anytime soon right now. They're with WWE, so I don't see this as happening anytime soon. I maybe could say a 20% chance on this maybe happening, but just for the fact that they're in WWE right now, maybe they're in the twilight of the career, I won't say a high probability of them winning the tag title for Ring of Honor, so maybe a 20% chance, and that's probably being a little bit generous.
You go 20? I'm going a 60% chance within the next possible 3 years. I'm going 60% chance because they've always talked about being the most accomplished. I mean, granted, you can't be the most dominant like the Road Warriors, but you can be the most accomplished. So I'm going as high as 65% that they hit Ring of Honor. Granted, they'll have some matches, but I'll guarantee you give them that one big match, they'll deliver and win those titles and really complete their career. Cling! Case number 4. The chances that an X Division wrestler becomes the TNA World Champion.
Well, it's going to depend. Are you talking in the World Title Series or just overall? Because you could have someone...
Both.
You could say someone who's an X Division star, maybe right now, could win the World Title Series, or maybe they, in the future, someone who's an X Division star goes on to become TNA World Heavyweight Champion. So, I mean, it could be a high probability. Now, in terms of right now, it would be a low chance in the World Title Series. In terms of World Title Series, I say maybe a 20% chance, although anything is possible. In the future, overall, you could have like a guy like Samoa Joe, who started out as an X Division competitor, going to win the world title, so it could be high probability. So for that, I could see a higher probability, maybe even a 45% chance of maybe an X Division star going on to win the world title. It just depends on where they want to go with the story.
I'll bring these names to you. Styles, Joe, Angle, Aries, and Sabin. 5 names. All X Division champs. 4, notice I said 4 out of those 5 ended up winning the TNA World Title. I got a high probability number here. I won't go as low and I won't go as high as 54%. Next one. Step it. The chances that Raw's ratings on USA will be above 5.6.
Well, with the Raw having low ratings right now and not really ever getting above a 3 or a 4, it's going to be very difficult for them ever to get above a 5. So at this point, I think it'd be very difficult. My odds would probably say maybe 15%.
9% for this reason. Since WrestleMania, which bar none has been their best WrestleMania, which was 31, which has been their best WrestleMania, the next night have accumulated literally the highest since the Attitude Era, and that was a 5.6. Since then, it's like everything you just said. It has literally been down to the riverside. I'm going 9% chance. Next one. We're sticking with Raw on this one. The chances that Monday Night Raw will take place inside either a football or a baseball stadium in the next 2 years.
Well, with that, I mean, you have WrestleMania, or now being at stadiums and stuff like that, but they tend not to have WrestleMania back in the same building. They tend to go to a very close place. So, I mean, I would say that would be the most likely for them to have it inside of a baseball or a football stadium. But just for the simple fact, I think they don't want to take away from WrestleMania. So, I don't see a very high percentage of this happening. So, maybe I could go like maybe a 30% chance of this happening.
I would agree, because the last time this happened on the Monday Night Raw, it was right before St. Valentine's Massacre, and it was during the Attitude Era. The Sky Dome, Toronto, Canada, 41,000. And that was the last time for a Monday Night Raw to ever have that high of a number on a Monday Night Raw. So I'm going low as well. I'm going as low as 27%. Next one, please. The chances that Sinclair Broadcasting with Ring of Honor going to Japan in 2016. The chances that Sinclair Broadcasting purchase a TV station in Japan.
Well, I mean, this is quite interesting, like you mentioned, with ROH having a working relationship with New Japan Pro Wrestling going to Japan in 2016. And it would be quite interesting to see if they would even be legally able to buy a TV station in Japan to be able to air programming, stuff like that. So I don't know, just from a legality issue and stuff like that, that may make stuff difficult. So I might go like maybe a 15% chance, 17% chance of them maybe getting a station in Japan. I think maybe legalities and other issues might stop them from being able to purchase a station. And so I'm going to go probably 15 to 17%.
Woo. And with those good points, that's why you're making my point. That's why you're making my percentage go higher. Sinclair has one tagline, being the number one diversified group of conglomerate television stations in America and in North America as well. They've literally, since ROH, since the purchase of Ring of Honor in 2011, they have went from number 4 in the pecking order, who nobody knew about, all the way up to number 1, just by acquiring television stations and becoming the ultimate hustler. So because of your reasons, that's why my number is going high. I'm going 78% that it happens and Sinclair will really become a big-time player. Oh, you're going to love this last one. Check, please. The chances that CM Punk returns to wrestling by late 2016, early 2017.
Well, I mean, this is going to be quite hard for me to make odds on that because, as you know, CM Punk has just injured himself and he's not even had his first fight yet. So I don't know if he would necessarily come back to wrestling that soon or not because he's not really had his forte in UFC MMA. So if he had had his first few fights and was getting beat, maybe he would come back to wrestling and I would give him a bigger percent. But at this point, with him being hurt and being out for a while and coming back in late 2016, early 2017, I don't see it as a high percent chance. So at this point, I'm going to say a 10% chance just for the simple fact that he's hurt and he's not had his first fight in MMA yet. So I'm just going to go 10% on this one.
Woo. And once again, you done made my number go high again. I say it's a possibility he will be a surprise entrant in the Royal Rumble. That'll be my prediction. I say if I really have bold predictions and if if this was the game of bold predictions, I would say the probability of him being in a surprise entry into the Royal Rumble being very, very high and winning. So I would say, just for this purpose here, and I would say WWE would find a way to settle all of this. He get his money, and all air is clear. I'm going as high as 84% that it'll happen.
Well, I will say this. If you look at what happened at Hell in a Cell, Alberto Del Rio just came back after the whole racism stuff. So,
Exactly.
I mean, if they can square things away with Del Rio, I mean, CM Punk, I mean, it's going to be harder for CM Punk just because he's CM Punk. He's not Del Rio. Oh, and what's happened has just been a lot of frustration building up. But, I mean, if Del Rio can get over his issues, I think you could see CM Punk. I don't think he'll be back 2016, 2017. It's going to depend on how his MMA career goes, how his health goes, and stuff like that, whether he gets back in the wrestling or not. But, I mean, it's possible that we may see him back in wrestling sometime in the future if we're still alive.
Would you want him as a surprise entrant into the Royal Rumble?
I think it would help WWE's business to have him as a surprise entrant in the
I think
Royal
so,
Rumble.
too.
So, I think it'd be good for business. So, me personally, yeah, I'd like to see CM Punk. I'm a big fan. I hate what's gone down, so I would love to see him back.
And do you think if Punk comes back, you think AJ will?
Well, I mean, it's potential if you got Punk back. I mean, if the bad blood with CM Punk's taken care of, I guarantee you could see AJ Lee come back.
Well, and speaking of coming back, we got to take this one last break, but still to come. What's the word for an Undertaker-less WrestleMania? Cena's Open Challenge, NXT in big arenas, and the possibility of Bray Wyatt winning the championship. What's the word? Guess what? We got a blank space for you, and you get to fill it coming up next.
This is Amber.
And this is Amanda. And you're listening to the Power of Pro Wrestling Podcast.
And we're back with this special 50th edition of the Power of Pro Wrestling Podcast. I'm still joined by Mr. Cornbread, Chris Heineken.
Hello.
So, you want to take this one, Mr. Cornbread?
Oh, we got another new segment. Hey, we've been doing you've been doing this for like 49 episodes, right?
Well, this is number 50, so I guess I've been doing it for 49 episodes before this one.
And when we say 49, we're not talking about San Francisco, okay? So get that out of your head.
Yeah, this isn't 1949, people, or 1749, or whatever that year was.
Thank you very much. We have a new We got a new segment that we're debuting. And guess what? This is no disrespect to the awesome singer named Taylor Swift, but
because I got a blank space, baby, and I'll write your name.
Well, guess what? That's what the name of this segment is. Blank space. Space. Pretty much we have a sentence. You get to fill it in with whatever word you like. And let's get to the first one. The Undertaker not competing at a WrestleMania would be blank.
It would be depressing. The Undertaker has been a staple of WrestleMania for quite a while now. So, see a WrestleMania without the Undertaker would be quite depressing, just for the simple fact he's been in WWE 25 years. They're celebrating at Survivor Series his 25th year in WWE. So, and he's been a staple for so long of WWE and WrestleMania, and he's given us these big matches year after year after year after year. To see a WrestleMania now without The Undertaker would be very depressing. In the earlier days, it wouldn't matter, but he's an icon, he's a phenom, as he's known as. So just to see a WrestleMania without The Undertaker, I feel would be very depressing.
And that's what makes this whole situation, him not being at WrestleMania, stank old topic. And the reason why it's going to be a stank old topic is because Undertaker has been one of your biggest draws to WrestleMania. He's literally brought in the biggest money at a WrestleMania. Granted, you may have all the great t-shirts and everything, but guess what? You think WrestleMania, you think Undertaker. Stink topic is how I'm going to phrase that one. Cling! Let's get to the next one. John Cena's U.S. Open Challenge was a or an blank to the WWE roster.
Well, I definitely could say it's been beneficial to the WWE roster. If you've looked, John Cena's U.S. Open Challenge since winning the belt at WrestleMania and then winning it back right after at Night of Champions, and then the U.S. Open Challenge, he has been consistently some of the best stuff on Raw and pay-per-view for this year. So, I mean, it's been beneficial to the roster. Now, I've kind of already talked about the U.S. Open Challenge and how it's not really benefited anyone truly. They just get that bump when they have that match with Cena, and they never really go anywhere. But you have to look, Kevin Owens, Cesaro, just a lot of the challengers that you don't see a lot or have those big profile matches, getting a match with John Cena, I feel has really been beneficial to the roster to have the U.S. Open Challenge for John Cena. And, I mean, kudos to him for doing it.
That's why my word in this case is eye-opener. Cling! And the reason why it has been eye-opener is because of everything you just said. And look at the rise. You want to talk about rise of guys? Look at the rise of Cesaro. Kevin Owens coming into the cup and debuts in the main roster against John Cena. Has one of the matches of the year with John Cena. One of the matches of the year candidates with John Cena. And look at the main event that we discussed earlier in this podcast. The four-way main event. How can you not say it wasn't an eye-opener? I mean, it's been a big-time eye-opener. Cling! And with that, the next one. NXT in bigger size arenas would be blank for the WWE.
I don't have a very good word here, but maybe my good word is going to be good. It would be actually good for the WWE. NXT has been the best thing or the biggest talk in professional wrestling today. Everybody who's anybody in professional wrestling wants to come to NXT. That's why you've seen guys like Samoa Joe show up. You've seen guys like James Storm show up. You're getting people from Shimmer showing up. You're getting all this national talent and even worldwide talent coming to the WWE just for NXT. So I feel with NXT being in bigger arenas, it would be good for WWE. I feel it would bring them in additional revenue and additional viewers that might help their viewership, especially when these guys go to the main roster.
Well, I really got a good word for this. I'm going to fill in this sentence. NXT in bigger size arenas would be culture shocking competitive. Cling! For the WWE. And the reason why it would be that way, because not just of everything that you just said, but the fact that they have changed the culture. They've literally changed the culture of WWE. Not just with Seth Rollins, not just with The Shield, not just with the Wyatt family, but with Cesaro, with Kevin Owens, with Neville. They've changed. They've changed their culture completely. Culture shocking. Cling.
Yeah, I agree with you just for the simple fact that you see a few years ago, I would have never thought you would have seen a guy like Seth Rollins or Kevin Owens or stuff like that showing up in WWE. And just for the simple fact of the success of Seth Rollins, or I should say CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, who came from the indie scenes, and just WWE has changed their business model, it has been culture shocking. So I agree with you there. That's a good word.
Next one. Bray Wyatt winning a championship in the WWE would be blank.
Surprising. And Bray Wyatt has not been booked very well necessarily in terms of matches and stuff like that. He's usually losing matches. So for him to actually win a championship at this point, I would love to see it happen, but it would be surprising to see him actually win a title. Oh, I would actually like to see him as WWE World Heavyweight Champion just for the simple fact I consider him the new Undertaker. So, I mean, I would just be surprised if I did see Bray Wyatt winning a championship.
My word here would be mysteriously interesting. Cling! And the reason why it would be mysteriously interesting is because Bray Wyatt, he's literally, you would figure that the Wyatt family will already have championships. Because look at what happened with the Shield. They've held three championships. Even now, even with the breakup and all that. They've held the tag titles. They've held the U.S. title. And now look at Seth Rollins, the world champion. The only person that held the title out of the Wyatt family is Luke Harper. He was former Intercontinental champion. So to me, this is almost like now is the time for Bray Wyatt to finally step his game up and not just be just laid back and just waiting for the right time to peak. That's why I call this mysteriously interesting. Next one. It is blank that local independent wrestling promotions are featured in reality television shows.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I know. It's because, trust me, if you were in this area, you will realize how crazy this weather is. That's why it's like, you call it sick folk weather all you want, but It's on you. It's blank. If you want me to repeat it, I can
Yeah,
repeat it.
go ahead and repeat it. That way I can kind of think of what word I want to use here.
It is blank that local independent wrestling promotions are featured in reality television shows.
It is groundbreaking, if I can say that. Because you're like I said when I in the last segment, I just watched the professional wrestling was WWE and stuff like that. I never really knew about any promotions, which territories were back in the day. So it's very groundbreaking. It's new and different, and it really gives exposure to those local promotions and stuff like that, where territories these were back in the day, and it just gives them more exposure and stuff like that. So it's groundbreaking. It's something new and innovative, and gives them more exposure, and it's good for the business because you can see the stars who might be the up-and-coming stars that might one day show up in WWE and NXT, who then will go from there to be on the main roster and be the stars of tomorrow. So I think it's very groundbreaking, and it's good for the business.
You remember that course in college that both of us took called oral communications?
Yes. Oh.
Well, I'm gonna use a word right here for that. I'm gonna use it. I'm going to my throwback teacher. It's attention grabbing.
Yes, and an attention getter. Yeah.
And the reason I would say that is because not just of the stuff that you mentioned, SoCal Pro Wrestling in California, they're about to be featured on a reality television show. Just in case if most people did not know. Last year, there's a television show on WGN America called Wrestling with Death. And it highlighted two things. It highlighted a family running a wrestling business and running a funeral business. So, along with groundbreaking, I'm calling it attention getting, which would be my word on this one. Next one. Pay strict attention to this question. Football players, basketball players, and mixed martial artists converting to pro wrestling is blank.
Okay. Let me think on this one. I got to find a good word to use here. I'm going to say it is.
Make up one if you have to.
Yeah. Vimshanep. No, I won't use that word. It is beneficial.
Cling!
It's interesting to see all these other sport athletes coming into pro wrestling and stuff. And I know you and me, you're the one who really says that all these other sports, you don't have a long lifespan to be in there. Like you're there 10, 15 years and then your life cycle's kind of done. In wrestling, you really can look because you see guys like Ric Flair. Like I watch a show on YouTube called Wrestle Talk TV that actually airs on Challenge TV out of England.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Road Warrior Animal, I believe, is the one who's still alive. He was talking about he had like maybe a 30-year career and stuff like that. So with that, you have a lot more longevity in wrestling. So I mean, I guess it's beneficial to their health.
If you're from the Texas side of things, and if you followed some of the guys who have been world's heavyweight champion in wrestling, I got a little word that I'm going to use right here, and I'm pretty sure Steve Corino will love me for this word. It's West Texas State-like. Cling! And the reason being is because, and I would normally throw in Ric Flair-ish for this word, simply for the fact that Ric Flair, he was 265 in football. He literally dropped 20 pounds to compete in pro wrestling. Same with Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes was already in the 300s. He dropped 20 pounds or less to compete in pro wrestling. Wahoo McDaniel. Think about some of the guys that have literally played in pro football that have literally become successful in wrestling. The alpha male Money Brown is one of them. Wahoo McDaniel, one of the best U.S. champions of all time. The total package Lex Luger. Most people did not realize this, but he actually played pro football in Canada at the young age of 19. And he became, if not the most successful, but perhaps the most dominant U.S. champion of all time. I think it's a big time deal. And look at the success of Shamrock. If we really want to go deep into this topic, Shamrock, Dan Severn, those two MMA artists, mixed martial arts, became NWA world champions. And look at Shamrock. Shamrock became the Intercontinental champ and world tag champ in WWE. So I'll say it's a little bit West Texas State-ish. But here's your next one. Oh, you'll love this one. Daniel Bryan's in-ring return to WWE would be blank.
I'm going to say it would be reinvigorating. Because WWE, like I've said this ad nauseum, the ratings are down right now, and Daniel Bryan is probably one of the most over guys you have seen in a while, probably since The Rock and Stone Cold in the Attitude Era, and Hulk Hogan and all those names. So he has really been your biggest star since those guys, and to have him back on television, I think would reinvigorate the product. It would make it a lot better, and it would bring the ratings up. So I think Daniel Bryan coming back to the WWE and his return would be reinvigorating.
Revolutionizing is my word. Cling! And not just for everything that you said, but if Daniel Bryan is the most quoted individual in all of professional sports.
Yes.
Sports.
Yes.
And think about this.
Yes.
Watching a Michigan State basketball game and having the whole entire crowd going, yes, and it's noticed on Sports Center, I say it'd be revolutionizing. Even though I will also say it would be refreshing for the WWE audience. Next one, and this one gets a little controversial on this one. TNA, ROH, and Global Force Wrestling, if on the same network, would be blank for all three companies.
It would be unique for all three companies. Is to have three different pro wrestling promotions all on one network would be a very unique situation, especially given the time and day we're in. Back in the day, that would be very unique if you had WCW and WWE on the same network and competing against one another. Now, with it being not so much a war of putting people out, it is still a very unique situation to have three different pro wrestling companies on the same network. So I think it would be a very unique situation and to have GFW, TNA, and Ring of Honor on the same network.
It would be ESPN-like.
There you go with those words again.
And it'll be that for this reason. AWA, World Class, USWA, GWF, GWF, Global Wrestling Federation. All of them have been on ESPN. Here's the thing that's really, really crazy. USWA and Global Wrestling were all on the network at the same time. So that's why it will be a little bit of ESPN-like for all of this. But, I mean, some people will even go as far as to say catastrophe. But I'm going ESPN-like. Cling! And, folks, as great as this podcast has been, it sucks we have to end it. But I'll tell you something else you better be doing. You better be having your ears on and your eyes glued to your little media device for any or all of Daily Turnbuckle. Great new segments from multiple various guests that will be joining Mr. Robert Red, and even sometimes yours truly will be stopping by just to even talk about a question or two. But why don't you join us for episode 51 and more of the Power of Pro Wrestling podcast? And I know you got some more you want to add. Please add it, please.
Well, most definitely. Now, we already mentioned our social media accounts. You can follow you at Chris Heineken1. You can follow
Twitter.
me on Twitter at Robert Red Jr. You can listen to this podcast, iTunes, or on SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/PPWP. If you want to support this podcast so we can take it to the next level, make this podcast even better.
We need sponsors.
We need sponsors. Sponsors, yeah. You can go on our Patreon. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/PPWP. You will get great exclusive content on there. You can get content early. There's a lot of great stuff on our Patreon page that you can do. So definitely Patreon. YouTube.com/user/The Robert Red. I'm going to try to segment the podcast. That way it's easier to listen. That way you don't necessarily have to listen to it all at once. Obviously, I want you to listen to all this all at once, but sometimes you just don't have time. So if you don't, you will see segments of this on my YouTube channel. So check it out, youtube.com/user/C Robert Red. Strictly LCW. You can watch every Saturday night or Sunday night. I'll let you plug that, Mr. Heineken.
Pretty much every Sunday night, unless if certain areas do permit. Every single Sunday night, 11 o'clock Eastern, and now we have it available on YouTube on Sunday nights, and of course the replay on YouTube on Tuesday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern. And guess what? I'm a sports writer, and if you want to throw in some topics, whether it's sports, whether it's wrestling, please feel free. Chris Heineken 1, that's where I am. And don't forget to please join Robert Red and a whole lot of other guests for the Power of Pro Wrestling podcast every single week. Well, it's been an excellent 50th episode. I've had a blast. I've learned. That's my big deal. And we hope you've learned as well. My friend, what do you think?
Oh, this has been a great podcast. We've went almost an hour and a half, so thank you guys for sticking with us and listening and supporting the Power Pro Wrestling. Just thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cornbread.
No, thank you.
For joining me, telling your story, all these great new segments we've done. And I'm very appreciative that you could join me on this 50th episode of the podcast. So I've had fun.
And God, thank you for letting me be crazy and let me have some power to help deliver this podcast. But most importantly, thank you, the audience, for having electricity.
Yes,
Thanks
most
very
definitely.
much.
Hey, this has been Robert Red for Cornbread Chris Heineken. This has been the Power Pro Wrestling. We will see you guys next time. Until then, take care and you have a good night.
We out!
And this podcast is brought to you by the Repost Network. Repost Network. Monetize your SoundCloud content. Sign up today at repostnetwork.com.